I call the meeting of the Committee on Energy, Finance, and Policy to order. We have quorum today, and so we have approval of the minutes. Our first item of business is to approve the minutes from January 16th. Rep. Murphy, have you had an opportunity to go over the minutes?
Yes, I have.
All right. Assuming there's no questions on the minutes, we have a motion prevails. All in favor of approval of minutes from January 16th, say aye.
Aye.
They are approved. All right, Vice Chair Murphy, would you want to come on up to chair? We're going to move House File 7 before the committee. 9. House File 9.
Chair Swedzinski moves to move House File 9 to the Committee on Taxes, and I believe you have an author's amendment.
That is my motion. Thank you, Chair Murphy. Moving House File 9 before the committee with the motion to move it to taxes after this committee. Appreciate your opportunity, committee members and public, for coming to the Capitol today and to hear House File 9. Minnesota's got a lot of work to do. Over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of mandates coming out of St. Paul. St. Paul knows best when it comes to energy policy. House File 9 seeks to foundationally change that for opportunities for build some off-ramps into the blackout bill that was passed in 2023 by the DFL majority and governor. And this bill will make our electric utilities better able to ensure reliability and lower rates by providing exemptions to requirements to meet the standard, and prohibits demolishing of fossil fuel plants if the electric utilities aren't able to keep rates below 5% of the national average. This bill will also end the moratorium on construction of new nuclear plants, and also qualifying hydroelectric power as an eligible energy technology under this new renewable energy standard. This bill is also unique in the fact that it's going to lower some taxes. That's why it's going to be making a stop over in taxes on its way through to the House floor. It works to end to give tax exemption on sales taxes for gas and electric derived for residential heat. Some of the big issues and why this bill is coming before us is really reliability. If you look at the energy output just on a day like today, what today's needs on the energy market versus what the needs are for uses, and what this bill potentially will do if we do not create off-ramps, will foundationally hamper electric generation and electrical delivery within our state, and quite frankly in our region, and put Minnesotans and Minnesota businesses at a unique disadvantage when it comes to reliability and affordability. And that's what this bill ultimately seeks to do. It's not an outright undoing, but it's definitely looking at the real markets that we're facing. I would ask you all to go to that app, and I'm sure maybe one of the testifiers can share on what we're using today on a day where it's 18 below zero, 30 below zero, 40 below zero at different parts of our state, and the unique impacts that has on our energy generation and energy consumption. According to the NERC, the 2024 long-term reliability assessment for the Midwest Independent Service Operator, which is MISO, is characterized as high risk. This is primarily due to the rate in which coal plants are being required to be shut down faster than we can replace that energy production. And one of the big parts of that is the nuclear moratorium. Is if we're going to be retiring coal, let's just have a conversation about an all above energy policy here in our state. Let's not eliminate, let's have a real solid conversation. And Xcel Energy has recently approached the PUC with a request to increase monthly rates by 9.5% in 2025 and a potential almost 4% in 2026 due to the increased costs associated with meeting the DFL's clean energy standard. And that really, as we have a cold weather over this last week, those increases for businesses across the state will really have a chilling effect on business expansion and development here in our state. And that's what this bill is looking to move forward. And from a tax perspective, while we don't know the full impacts of tax cuts in this bill, because we're still requiring a tax fiscal note, and that would be if you have someone within the administration, it's my understanding that they are withholding fiscal notes from us because they do not want to recognize this legislature, which is a real shame. Minnesotans, while they're paying higher energy bills, while they're paying higher taxes, we have jobs to do here at the legislature, and it's our hope that the administration will please pull back and begin to work with the legislature. And during these cold times, let's warm some hearts and let's work across the aisle and get some jobs done. So with that, Section 1 of the bill removes the requirement to be eligible energy technology. And so that allows for larger hydroelectric power, must have a capacity less than megawatts. And under this change, all hydroelectric power is considered to be eligible for the energy technology, regardless of the capacity and the date of operation. That's going to be a big important part of what we do, whether it's South Dakota, whether it's North Dakota, whether it's Nebraska, or whether it's Canadian hydroelectric power. We all play a big part of our energy partnership across our state. We can't take our eggs and go home. We need to play nice with our neighbors, and let's recognize those neighbors for what they do. And so we want to change that. And then on lines 4.17 to 4.19, it adds, which states a requirement to meet eligible energy technology. So solar energy standards to carbon-free standards is automatically delayed for 3 years for any electric utility that does not meet the goal under Section 216, which requires retail electricity rates for each customer class to be at least 5% below the national average. One of the things that we heard many times over the last couple years is that solar energy and wind are primarily the cheapest source of energy. And one of the questions that we continually ask in committee is why on earth will we not hold those technologies accountable to deliver those cheap energies? And whether it's solar gardens, whether it's others, the state can do a better job and create a better path when it comes to the deployment of these energy technologies, not on our time and not on our timeline, but put it on the timelines of what actually the market can handle, what our businesses can handle, and what our families can handle. And Section 4 prohibits political subdivisions from issuing a permit to an electricity utility to demolish a fossil fuel electric generating plant if the utility fails to meet its goal under 216 clause that requires a retail average rates to consumer to be at least 5%. So this really is focused on getting rid of technology that already exists. And our goal with that is foundationally is that if you're crossing a bridge and a bridge that you bash the bridge out as you go past it, and so we're really trying to make sure that if we find ourselves in a failed energy policy, that we can still go back to the technologies that have been built before us and potentially continue to use those. And Section 5 states that it is the goal of the state of Minnesota to support the development and deployment of carbon capture and sequestration. And we have an amendment. I would like to move the A1 amendment to kind of get the bill in the shape in that particular area that I would like to get it in my shape that I'd like it. So I'd like to move my author's amendment clarifies that the state does not have a financial obligation attached to this new language within Section 5, declaring that the state's policy to support carbon capture does not also obligate us to use state money to do that.
Chair Swedzinski moves the A1 amendment. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'd have you proceed on. Then we'll take a vote on that A1. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. And then Section 6, it expands the state sales tax exemption for customers who use natural gas and electricity as their primary source of residential heat year-round. So this is an increase from previous law, which only included the exemption for the billing months of November through April. This section will go into effect for sales and purchases made after June 30th, 2026. And so that's foundationally, when you look at, the way your power is being purchased or you're looking at the way that your homes are being heated, this would simply allow families and businesses to make purchases and not pay sales tax that year-round. And so this is a cost-saving measure so that those dollars don't flow into the state, but they stay in the pockets of our businesses and families. And so with that, that's my presentation of bill. Is there any questions? Otherwise, I'd love to hear from testifiers that have come from the public and
Chair Swedzinski, we do have some testifiers.
Yes.
And maybe we could move on to the testifiers first. I have a
think we
list.
have a list, Mr. Chair. Whoever would like to come up first is on our list. Would be great to have.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would Jenny Glumack or maybe Michelle Benson be ready as the next? And could you please introduce yourself for the record?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Jenny Glumack, Director of Government Affairs for the Minnesota Rural Electric Association. We are the association that represents 50 of the electric not-for-profit co-ops here in Minnesota who serve 1.7 million member owners throughout the state. I do actually have, per the chair's request, the MISO app. And at the moment, it is 34 megawatts of coal, 28 of natural gas, 11 nuclear, 18 wind, solar 6, and then other sources. So just as an FYI, you can see that we need baseload energy, especially on these cold days and hot days. So Minnesota cooperatives are on track to meet the state's 2040 carbon-free standard. However, with the rising energy demand that we are all seeing, we continue to be concerned about reliability and affordability, as the chair stated. The North American Electric Reliability, NERC, has identified the MISO region, which includes Minnesota, as being at high risk of capacity shortfalls within the next decade. Minnesota needs to embrace an all tech on deck approach and include all carbon-free and dispatchable resources and not incentivize one of those over the other. NERC's 2024 long-term reliability assessment highlights the urgent need for firm, reliable power sources like nuclear energy to maintain grid stability and meet increasing demand. We appreciate that Representative Swedzinski's includes lifting the nuclear, his bill includes lifting the nuclear moratorium and includes any level of carbon capture. Nuclear is the only carbon-free resource that can provide 24-hour baseload power, as we know. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has noted multiple times that carbon capture projects are key to reaching global climate goals. As it stands today, Minnesota has one of the most aggressive carbon-free energy standards in the nation and is also the only state with a complete total ban on all new nuclear energy. The reliability nuclear would provide under our carbon-free standard is essential for maintaining grid stability and meeting the demand for round-the-clock power. This is even more important as our society becomes increasingly reliant on electricity for transportation, heating, and industrial processes, all while baseload energy is retired at a faster rate than new generation is being built. As the committee moves forward with legislation this session, electric co-ops would ask that you look at every policy that goes through this committee, everything you consider, through the lens of ensuring electricity remains reliable, affordable, and safe. House File 9 is responsible policy that meets these three tenets and are at the center of MREA's mission. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Ms. Glumack? Thank you. Michelle Benson. And the next on deck is Annette Henkel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, over here. If this microphone works better. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Swedzinski. Did my homework, got my MISO grid. As everybody knows, on days like today, 24/7, 365 electricity is a key policy priority. I am Michelle Benson. I am Director of Energy Policy for the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment on House File 9. The Chamber and our more than 6,300 members believe in a triple goal of affordable, reliable, and cleaner energy. Meeting all three parts of this goal is essential for Minnesota businesses to remain competitive regionally, nationally, and yes, globally. While Minnesota has enacted a 100% carbon-free by 2040 mandate, market forces, voluntary commitments were already driving transformational changes in energy supply and usage. Whether it's reducing carbon emissions in operations, making more sustainable products, or helping their suppliers and customers to undertake the same ambitious plans to reduce environmental impact, the changes are real and ongoing. Minnesota's business community has been stepping up with innovative ways to expand electric transportation, energy-efficient buildings, materials, tools, and technology, and expects a low-cost energy supply to support those investments. Energy is a major cost for many Minnesota businesses. In the past 2 decades, commercial and industrial electricity affordability has suffered. Minnesota's electric rates were once an attractive feature for business expansion or relocation with costs that were below the national average. But now they're the 17th highest for commercial and 14th highest for industrial in the United States. One of our members calculated that electric savings would reach $3.2 million using the same number of kilowatts in Arizona as they do in Minnesota. $3.2 million that could be reinvested in training, in attracting workforce, in innovating in their facilities so that they can reduce energy usage and get products to market faster. The reliability of energy is also critical to Minnesota's economy. Outages pose enormous safety risks to Minnesotans and create operational disruptions with significant economic impacts. And as we all know, days like today, when our grid is tested, it matters most that reliability be a significant policy discussion. Additionally, Minnesota has long been a center of innovation. The next major innovation is not on the horizon, it is at our doorstep. Artificial intelligence, including large language models and machine learning, will be a part of improving productivity and accelerating innovation for businesses large and small. All of this computing power will require a stable, available, and affordable electricity if Minnesota is to remain competitive. House File 9 directly addresses the energy concerns of Minnesota innovators and employers by expanding carbon-free energy production in the form of hydroelectric power, studying carbon sequestration, and lifting the prohibition on expanding nuclear power in Minnesota. We believe the priorities outlined in House File 9 will reduce energy costs for Minnesotans, improve reliability, and respect the goal of cleaner energy for the benefit of Minnesota ratepayers. Thank you for the opportunity to add the voice of more than 6,300 businesses of all sizes from your districts and across Minnesota. I thank you all members, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have and of course be available for further discussions.
Thank you, Ms. Benson. Members, any questions for Ms. Benson? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Annette Henkel, and then Blake Johnson is on deck.
Back and forth. No. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, my name is Annette Henkel, and I'm with a group called the Minnesota Utility Investors. We are a statewide grassroots organization of Minnesotans that have invested in the regulated, investor-owned natural gas and electric utilities that serve Minnesota. For your reference, just going to give you a picture of who our members are. We're the mom and pop retail shareholder. The average age of our members is probably 70 plus. Emphasis on the plus. They are ratepayers, they are active Minnesotans, and many rely upon the utilities dividend for their livelihood. You've heard a lot of testimony this morning, and I'm not going to reiterate this afternoon, but very briefly, we would like to express our support for the language in House File 9 that will allow new nuclear energy to be discussed in Minnesota as a carbon-free, reliable source of generation, as well as the provision that allows all hydropower to be considered renewable energy. We firmly believe that the companies that our members have invested in need to have all generation options on the table to be successful and to meet the growing demand for power. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Henkel. Any questions for Ms. Henkel from our members? Thank you. Blake Johnson's next, and then Rick Evans follows.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Blake Johnson. I am the Government Relations Representative for the Prairie Island Indian community. I am also a tribal member, and my Dakota name is Hokshira Mazawambali, which means Iron Eagle Boy. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify before the committee today. My testimony on the nuclear moratorium repeal is a topic that is very important to our tribe. Due to the unique situation we find ourselves in relative to Xcel's Prairie Island nuclear generating plant. The Prairie Island Indian community is a federally recognized tribe in Minnesota whose reservation is located on an island, Prairie Island, in the Mississippi River. Our reservation sits less than 700 yards away from a plant and over 1,000 tons of nuclear waste stored from that plant. We are the closest community, native or non-native, in the nation to the nuclear power plant and stored nuclear waste. As you may know, Prairie Island nuclear plant went into operation in 1973, adjacent our reservation. At that time, the tribe did not have the resources to ask questions of the company, engage in regulatory process, or lobby at the legislature. So the plant was built without consultation with our community. In fact, a number of tribal members worked on the construction of the plant, given the lack of the economic opportunity at that time for our membership. The Prairie Island nuclear plant was put in operation with the idea that the federal government would construct a national repository for nuclear waste. As we all know, there was a site in Nevada, Yucca Mountain, which was designated by the federal government for nuclear waste. Yucca Mountain never became viable despite tens of millions of dollars spent. So in 1994, the Minnesota legislature authorized dry cask storage to be stored at Prairie Island. The tribe admittedly opposed this, but it was passed over our objections. As a result of the policy choice, one which we oppose, tribal members have lived next to spent nuclear waste for 30 years and next to a nuclear generating plant for 50 years. There are several generations of tribal members who have never known their ancestral lands without either of these things existing. We understand the reason for this discussion today as part of the state's carbon-free goals and the future demand from data centers and AI. There is additional need for baseload energy into the future that also complies with carbon-free law passed in 2023. As original stewards of the land we're currently on, we support conservation efforts in the move to clean energy. But we must also keep in mind that each energy policy decision comes with trade-offs. If we rely on legacy sources of generation, then we run the risk of additional pollution. If we rely solely on alternative technologies, there is a risk of reliability. And if we rely heavily on nuclear generation, the result is additional nuclear waste. Each of these decisions affects the general public and the communities in which the generation is placed. Unfortunately, Prairie Island has had front row seat to the nation's failed nuclear storage policy. We don't know when or if the waste will ever be moved. If it is moved to a repository at some point, then the waste must be safely stored for thousands of years. The 1994 legislature wrestled with these trade-offs as well. The 1994 law authorizing casks also put in the law in 1994 authorizing casks also put the nuclear moratorium in place. Those legislative findings from that law state, the legislature finds that there is great uncertainty over the means and costs of disposing of radioactive waste generated at a nuclear power generating plant. Current and future electric ratepayers are at risk to pay for these uncertain and potentially enormous costs. These costs could cause economic hardship for the citizens of the state and damage economic growth. For these reasons, the legislature finds it necessary to protect its citizens against these costs. While these potential costs do not currently warrant closing and operating a nuclear power plant, they do warrant a moratorium on new nuclear plant construction and close monitoring of the operating nuclear power plants. That was the laws of Minnesota in 1994, Chapter 641. The issues raised in 1994 still ring true today. The trade-offs of the generation of additional nuclear waste relative to the risk to our community and the broader public should be carefully considered. With this in mind, Prairie Island has historically been opposed to lifting the nuclear moratorium without a viable solution for the waste. And that is where we sit today. That said, we understand the policy choices you are faced with. And that is where, and we are well aware of the consequences of the climate change if we do not take any action. Consistent with past practices, our tribe is always willing to engage in the discussions on how to move Minnesota forward in energy conservation. In order to do that, however, Prairie Island needs time to engage with its community on these issues. We look forward to the continued discussion with advocates and the stakeholders on these issues going forward. And we, from Prairie Island's perspective, we want to engage with each member one-on-one to have conversations so they can understand more about our tribe, who we are as Dakota people, and to get a better understanding of our viewpoint on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for your testimony. Are there any questions from our members? Thank you. Next up is Rick Evans, and after that, Ken, might pronounce wrong, Solom. After the, what's that? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, I missed. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Evans?
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Rick Evans with XL Energy. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today on House File 9. XL Energy appreciates the bill's focus on keeping electric rates low, and we look forward to working with the committee throughout the session to pursue that objective. I want to make a comment on a couple of sections of the bill specifically. First being Section 3, having to do with the nuclear moratorium. XL Energy currently owns and operates the only nuclear power plants in the state. Those plants have operated safely, efficiently, and reliably for over 50 years, and our plan is to continue their operation into at least the 2050s. We've relicensed the Monticello plant currently to 2050, and we're in the process of relicensing the 2 units at Prairie Island to 2052 and 2053. Or is that 2053 and 2054? At any rate, the early 2050s. They are an integral part of our ability to provide low-cost, reliable energy to our customers and also reduce carbon dioxide emissions from our system. Over the years operating the Prairie Island nuclear plant, we've come to understand the impact that the plant has on the Prairie Island Indian community, Mr. Johnson has just referred to, which is right next door to the plant. Especially in recent years, we've enjoyed a very positive and collaborative working relationship with the Prairie Island Indian community to ensure that the impacts are fully understood and addressed every step of the way. XL Energy believes that nuclear power should be one of the options as we continue our energy transition, and our support for lifting the current moratorium will depend on the full participation of the Prairie Island Indian community as a critical stakeholder in the discussion. We look forward to working with the tribe as well as with the legislature to ensure that tribal issues are addressed. The other section of the bill I'd like to address briefly is Section 4 of the bill. This has to do with the demolition of fossil fuel plants. The decision to retire a fossil fuel generation plant is a complicated financial business decision. We understand that those decisions raise concerns among policymakers about the reliability and cost of energy when those plants are closed. But as you know, XL Energy and other regulated utilities file resource plans with the Public Utilities Commission every 2 years. Those resource plans are a robust examination of the potential energy needs of our customers, including future data centers, and an evaluation of all the options that can provide that energy looking out over 15 years. The resource plan is a public process that takes place in front of the Public Utilities Commission, where anyone can present their own ideas about the best way to move forward. As I said, the plans look out 15 years in the future, but they're repeated every 2 years. Just as soon as we finish one, we start another one, in order to make sure that we're taking into account all of the economic and technology changes that occur over time. We think the resource plan process is the best way to include regulators, policymakers, and our customers in the planned construction and retirement of new generation. Decisions about what to do with the site of a plant after retirement is also a complicated business decision and has broad impact on the communities where they're located. Section 4 of House File 9 limits the options at the site of a retired new plant in a way that may frustrate community preferences and may end up costing utility customers more. Communities may find themselves with idle property that could be put to a better use. Furthermore, maintaining safety and security at the retired plant will impose costs on utility customers that in the long run may exceed the cost of plant demolition. We'd like to work with the authors and supporters of this provision to better understand these concerns and to find solutions that address those concerns while keeping costs down and giving communities more flexibility. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Any questions for Mr. Evans? Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Evans, just a question about your company's willingness or whatever to go along with new nuclear construction and having to have support from Prairie Island, which I can totally understand in the event of a big mega plant being constructed. But in the case of moving ahead to the small modular plant, maybe located in northwest Minnesota or up on the Iron Range someplace, would your company still have that same hesitation in supporting nuclear if we're talking about a small modular system?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, Representative Anderson, I appreciate the question. I think when we start getting into those details, this is the kind of conversation that I think we need to have. Because as Mr. Johnson gave really a very brief history, there's quite a bit of history of the nuclear policy of the state and the impact that it has on the Prairie Island nuclear, or the Prairie Island Indian community. I think my best answer to your question is we would like, in the discussion of any future nuclear, to have the Prairie Island Indian community's concerns addressed. And of course, different kinds of plants in different locations and under different circumstances will be all part of that discussion.
Representative Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Evans. I have a question also just regarding, you talked about some of the projections for electric and, you're looking all the time at how it's changing. Do you have an idea over the next 5 or 10 years what you would expect just from your projections in the amount of need for electricity?
Mr. Chair, unfortunately, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can certainly find that out and I'll get back to the committee with that information. We just had a resource plan approved by the Public Utilities Commission late last year, which is our latest resource plan. And that would include, the assumptions on energy needs going forward, as well as providing that energy. And of course, we've already started working on the next resource plan, but I can provide you with the up-to-date information on that, and we'll do so.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Representative Mecklen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Evans, this IRP that was approved last year, that would be the one that was testified to in the session of 2024? Would that be correct?
You're taxing my memory. We may have had hearings here in the legislature on that. If it was in 2024, yes, it would have been that resource plan.
Okay, so I'll just help you out here. Yes, you did have an IRP presentation in 2024 where I asked about the Microsoft AI data center. In that, the young lady that was with you, there was a series of questions which then came to light as to what the anticipated power usage just the Microsoft Center itself would be using. In the considerations that were made within that IRP that you now have said that was approved by the PUC, did it take into account the 4 to 6 that we're now hearing about, of the additional data centers throughout, I believe it's Roseville, Northfield area, the 2 in Becker, and potentially there's 2 more coming that I've heard about?
Mr.
Mr.
Evans?
Chair, Representative Mecklin, again, I don't know off the top of my head what was included in those projections. I'll say, first of all, I'll find that out and I'll let you know. But I'll also just repeat that we've started the next resource plan already for just this circumstance, that we don't know, no one can predict 15 years into the future accurately, and we understand that, which is why we start over every 2 years and start working on it again. But I will find out what was in the last resource plan and let you know.
Representative Mecklin? Thank you, Mr. Evans. Kent Solom, followed by Rachel Stuckey. Yep, proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Representative Swedzinski. I'm Ken Stulum, Director of Government Relations for the Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association. I hope my voice is being heard. I just got over a case of the flu, not something to have fun with, but my voice is iffy. I'll be quick. Our members are interested in being able to provide reliable, sustainable, and affordable service to their members. In light of the mandate to be carbon-free, it is, as you've heard, an all-of-the-above approach to what types of energy will make sense for our utilities and our utilities that work through their joint action agencies. This would include lifting the nuclear moratoria. You may wonder, why would a small muni really care about the nuclear moratoria? Well, it's exactly that there's new technology coming around, there's partnership efforts, there are investment opportunities that make sense to have the conversation, will this or will this not be of value to members? But right now, we can't have a meaningful dialogue because our hands are tied if the results should be that we would recommend being part of the nuclear source. The small modular technology is what we're looking at primarily. But when you hear the conversations about the nuclear moratoria, I won't speak for Excel. Mr. Evans does a wonderful job of doing that, but it's not on the radar of any of our members that they're looking at the same technology that's out there right now in terms of Prairie Island or Monticello. We are talking the small modular new technology and being able to include that as part of the planning process. That's basically what I wanted to echo from the others. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Solon. Any questions for Mr. Solon from our members? Thank you. Next up, Rachel Stuckey, then after that, Zach Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Chair Swedzinski and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. My name is Rachel Stuckey, and I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Conservative Energy Forum, or MNCEF. We're a nonprofit education and an advocacy organization that promotes a market-based, all-of-the-above energy strategy for Minnesota based on key principles such as economic growth, property rights, personal stewardship, job creation, and national security. We were encouraged to hear the committee's support for a similar all-of-the-above agenda at last week's meeting and strongly believe such an approach will be required to meet our state's objectives of a clean, affordable, and reliable energy system. MNCEF supports the transition to cleaner energy, and we have consistently opposed government mandates that interfere with allowing market forces to work. For example, we did not support the 100% by 2040 mandate, as we believe setting arbitrary deadlines is both unnecessary and potentially harmful to Minnesota's power system. Reliability and affordability should be our priorities, and if the mandate proves unattainable without compromising these essential requirements, we should be willing to adjust as necessary. What Minnesota truly needs and what House File 9 begins to address is a stable, long-term energy policy that transcends partisan control. Minnesota's energy customers cannot succeed in a world where policy swings wildly between opposing approaches with each change in government leadership. We believe this bill can be consistent with the policy direction that Minnesota has long pursued. For decades, there has been broad consensus on the need to generate more electricity closer to home. To the extent Minnesota has had bipartisan policy consensus on energy issues, it is centered upon cleaner, more reliable, and more locally generated energy. This aligns with this bill's support for baseload power sources like nuclear energy and hydroelectric power, while not limiting other types of energy such as residential heating fuels, all of which complement wind, solar storage, and other contributors to our energy mix. This bill represents a promising start toward a balanced Minnesota energy policy that prioritizes clean, affordable, homegrown power to meet our growing needs. We look forward to working with the committee to ensure Minnesota's secure, reliable, and resilient energy future. I welcome any questions. Otherwise, thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Stuckey. Are there any questions from our members for Ms. Stuckey? Representative Weiner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You had mentioned hydroelectric, and actually part of this bill just raised a question in my mind. The retired fossil fuel plants, is there any hydroelectric that could potentially be taken out or maintained? And I guess when you talked about the scorched earth policy that's happened, you know, burning the bridge behind us sort of thing. Europe had a really bad energy policy for quite some time, and it really came to light when the situation with Ukraine came up. And I can think of a hydroelectric facility, I think it was Granite Falls down in that area. And I don't know the viability of that, but is there other hydroelectric facilities across the state or our neighboring states that this bill would apply to, so that we would not be tearing those facilities down?
Ms. Stuckey?
I'm actually not sure. I don't know if the author has anything to that.
Mr. Chair, Representative Weiner, you know, it's not my understanding that there is a large push. I think in general, there has been some concern, especially on the West Coast. You know, you've heard whether it's Washington State or Oregon, or even particularly, I think maybe in a few canyons in California as well. There has been a move to remove some older hydroelectric power generation, and that's kind of a twofold, one from just an age standpoint, maintenance standpoint, but then also from, you know, save the guppy standpoint as well. So I haven't heard necessarily, you know, from, you know, a vast majority of hydroelectric power. There's some in the state of Minnesota, but a lot of it is brought in from the Missouri River projects, but also going as the rivers run north in Canada. So that's where a lot of that's based. And so that's just, we're trying to just, main part of the recognition of this bill is to recognize those projects and the continuing growth and development of them across our national borders, but also our state borders as well.
Representative Weiner, any follow-up? Thank you, Ms. Stuckey.
Thank you.
Last person as a testifier is Mr. Zach Martin. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Representative Swedzinski, Chair Murphy, and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me the time to comment on House File 9 this afternoon. My name is Zach Martin, and I'm the Government Affairs Manager for Elite Minnesota Power. Minnesota Power is an investor-owned utility that has been headquartered in Duluth for more than a century, serving 150,000 customers across a 26,000 square mile service territory. We also have more than 1,000 proud employees across the entire region. As many of our Iron Range representatives would know, Minnesota Power is one of the most unique investor-owned utilities in the nation because more than 70% of our energy sales go to serve some of the nation's largest industrial customers who compete on a global scale. We also serve some of the lowest income communities in the state, so we appreciate the legislature's focus on affordability. We are committed to complying with the Minnesota's carbon-free standard and have always said that we need all tools available in the toolbox, including hydropower, nuclear, and carbon capture to help meet our targets. We appreciate some of the proposals made in this bill to make more technologies eligible in statute, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with all members of the committee on policy proposals related to the carbon-free standard. So I'm the last, and therefore I'll be brief, but thank you for your time, and would happy to ask any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any questions from our members? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone from the public that would wish to testify? Any further discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Representative Swedzinski, and members, Marty Seifert, I represent Brainerd Public Utilities. I just wanted to stand in support of the bill, and Representative Wiener's question was very relevant to all of this. We are looking to have legislation this year to upgrade the hydro facilities at Brainerd. As Representative Swedzinski knows, there are hydro facilities in his district in Granite Falls. He's carried legislation in the past. Redwood Falls, which was in a district I formerly represented, that he represented before redistricting. So we do have hydro facilities in Minnesota that are artificially capped at the capacity because of the way the legislation is structured. You're essentially opening it up, where if you had a large hydro facility that was proposed in Minnesota, where we do have a lot of renewable river capacity, you're essentially artificially capped, and sometimes the economy of scale makes sense that you can ramp up hydro facilities at a larger scale, but because of the way the current statute is worded, you're artificially capped at it, and sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. So you will, hopefully the committee will be seeing legislation from Representative Heinzman to upgrade the Brainerd facility, but we do consider all hydro to be renewable. I think it's common sense. It is there. It doesn't damage the environment. It simply turns turbines. The facility in Granite Falls has been in operation for over 100 years without any damages or problems, and helping with the capacity of adding into the energy grid. I think all of you know, as we face the challenges of cold winters and hot summers, we want to be all in. Hydro, nuclear, whether it be fossil fuel or whatever, that the modern technologies that are afforded with the smaller nuclear facilities particularly can add into our grid. So as we look at variety of opportunities with hydro, we would ask for you to consider this legislation and then also upgrading our facilities as they need it. Some of these turbines haven't been replaced for decades, and Minnesota has this clean renewable resource that we should take advantage of.
Thank you, Mr. Seifert. Are there any questions from our members for Mr. Seifert? Thank you. Are there any follow-up comments by the membership or Chair Swedzinski?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members and members of the public. You know, go ahead.
Chair Baker? I'm sorry, Representative Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I want to thank all the testifiers today. I've been around here for a while, but I'm kind of newbie back on the energy. You've heard that before, and I really appreciate getting kind of caught up to speed on the nuts and bolts of how do we put out power in Minnesota. I've been watching MISO be under the microscope and nationally to see that we don't have a great, robust backup system, that we need to pay attention to these transmission lines and such. What we heard today from a lot of folks, including our Prairie Island community, is we need to pay attention to all partners and everybody at the table. What Ms. Benson said about the savings that we would have enjoyed, that should be alarming to everybody. We've been putting ourselves at a disadvantage for a number of years now. And again, not being a part of this committee in the last session makes me kind of, try to ask the question, what happened here when there was zero bipartisan support for that big bill that passed? I don't understand it. I wish members were here to ask that question that I could do that with. So this is our week that's gone by and we can't really have these conversations at this point. So I'm looking forward to, Mr. Chair and other members, these kind of conversations about why didn't we make large hydro a better part of this conversation? Why didn't we at least try to dive into more conversations with nuclear to make sure the relationship with Xcel Energy that they've been working with the Prairie Island community is all part of that conversation. Again, I'm sorry that I'm going to play catch up this year. I'm just kind of, I'm saying that because we have a lot of things to move forward. This, to me, is a extremely good bill to start passing forward. And honestly, in energy, like someone said before, energy needs to be the kind of committee that we all do in a bipartisan way when it comes to this kind of big, large policy. Because then we start playing the ping pong effect. You cannot be swinging back and forth with policy in this kind of an energy environment when we've got 30 below weather and you've got 110 degrees in the summer. We've got to have it agreed to by both sides. So I just want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing this important bill forward. House File 9 has got to be one of our top priorities to do this, so thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, do you have any follow-up comments for Representative Baker?
Bill?
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too would like to thank Chair Swedzinski for the bill. I would add that besides the importance of it economically and whatever else, it's a life or can be a life or death matter, especially up here in Minnesota when we have these temperatures of 20, 25 below zero. And if I could just go down memory lane for a minute, I looked up back in the records, and it was 2017, I believe, when we had the polar vortex. And it was colder than it was this morning, I think 25, 30 below zero. But we had winds of between 25 and 30 miles an hour, extremely dangerous situation. And I live in an old farmhouse, and my wife was down here babysitting, so our house was empty that week, and I was worried about our water pipes freezing. So I went home one evening after session in the, I think, 60 below wind chills, and I got home, and I did have a frozen pipe that hadn't burst, but got it thawed out in time. And when I came back to St. Paul the next morning, I go towards Sauk Center to get on the freeway, and there's a wind facility there to the south and west of Sauk Center. I think it's 28 towers, 28 wind towers. And again, it was 25 or 30 below zero. In the towers I could see from the highway, not one of them was turning. And if there was ever a morning we needed all the power we could get from any available source, that was that morning. And I just relay that to you in terms of we need a system in this state, this far north, that's reliable. If it's, we talk about that along the cost factor. Well, I think reliability comes first almost, because it can be an extremely dangerous situation in weather like we're experiencing today. And again, it seems common sense, all of the above. We're not putting down any one source of power is being worse than any other, but let's look at all of them. They all have a place, they all fit in our expanding need for generation of power. So again, thanks for the bill, I support it, and let's get this bill on its way. So thanks, Chair Swedzinski.
Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chair Swedzinski, for bringing the bill forward. I just kind of want to make some comments similar to what my colleagues have already kind of made today. What we witnessed and what we're in the last couple of years and now what we're trying to do today with this bill is really admirable that we're finally taking that approach that this issue is larger. I think that we've lost what it means to turn on a light switch, and this bill today is addressing that and really getting at that root cause, that there is multiple factors and that, like you said, we need that all of the above energy approach. And to make another plug with how important this bill is that one of the other larger conversations that we will be having this year, and not to plug my own committee, but in the housing committee, we want affordability to remain there too. Affordable power is a huge part of affordable housing. Keeping more money in people's pocket is helping to lift them out of poverty, give them a higher standard of life. And this bill is going to work on getting us there today. And it's comprehensive. It's not just picking one. And I think the last 2 years we saw one or two things getting picked as to be the champion. And this bill today is realizing that we need all of them, and we need all partners at the table. And I think by looking at the room around us of the people that showed up to be a part of this conversation today, I can't appreciate you all enough, because you are the people in this room that we're going to be working with to get this bill done and get it done in prime time and start putting Minnesota back on track when it comes to energy and affordability. So I can't wait to vote yes for this bill today and can't wait to see it pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Igo. I'd just like to add a comment. Thank you for bringing the bill, Mr. Chair. I had a chance to tour the hydroelectric plant in Pella last year. Technology has gotten way ahead. They're able to show that in 30 years, that plant pays for itself. We need all these other things coming into play. If you look at Germany's market right now for electricity, they're at 50 cents a kilowatt. We're around 10 for me locally. Try on a bill that increases your electric bill by 5 times. So I appreciate you doing this bill. It's important for us to be affordable, reliable, and safe. So thank you. With that, Chair Swedzinski renews his motion that House File 9 be referred to the Committee on Taxes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say no. The bill passes. Our hearing is now adjourned. Thank you.